This episode is brought to you by The Venture Project. The Venture Project is a business incubator and co-working space located in Oshkosh, Wisconsin at 210 North Main Street, Oshkosh, Wisconsin. You don't have to be local if you want to get involved. You can always go to my website, aaronjarmstrong.com, to figure out how we can get a free consultation to book with you if you're interested in starting a business, you're interested in finding a side hustle, you're wanting to turn your passion into something monetary. Let's figure out a way to do that. I do free consultations up to 30 minutes, and we can figure out how we can get your business off the ground. If you are local to the Oshkosh, Wisconsin area, stop on by, set up an appointment at aaronjarmstrong.com/schedule. Otherwise, to learn more about what we have going on at the Venture Project, you can go to theventureprojectoshkosh.com. All right, folks, welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews podcast. I am your host, AJ Armstrong. You can follow me at Aaron Armstrong33 on Instagram or aaronjarmstrong.com. Today's guest, we had a really exciting discussion today around shiny object syndrome, around trying to create focus in your business, especially for entrepreneurs, creative entrepreneurs at that. So our guest today was David Wood. He's a laser-focused coach after life. As a consulting actuary for a Fortune 100 company, David built the world's largest coaching business, becoming #1 on Google for life coaching, discovering that shiny object syndrome is an epidemic among high performers. David coaches rock star business owners to double revenue, achieve more in less time, and to be extraordinary entrepreneurs, partners, parents, and leaders. He has been featured on over 120 different podcast episodes, including Sharkpreneur. He's been on John Lee Dumas's Entrepreneurs on Fire. He is really a fantastic guest, exciting conversation, and we get into some really cool, deep discussions around how this can pertain to you specifically. Without any further ado, welcome to the show.
Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you how to be somebody.
Where in your life did you learn that you're not good enough?
Take what you're most passionate about and what you're most fearful of. What is the plan to overcome that fear? And what is the plan to enact that passion?
You guys are listening to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews podcast. Winners, people crushing it in life. Wallets, talking about money, investing, small business, real estate, and Worldviews, talking about life's philosophy and some of the biggest questions we have out there. Joining me from Boulder, Colorado, we got David Wood, a high-performance coach, and really a man of many other talents as well. I think we're going to dig into it when we hear your story, but he really helps business owners take their business to the next level, improve revenue, and also just kind of get personal about what it is about you that's going to do that. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, AJ. Happy to be here. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Oh my gosh, I was really excited when I had the opportunity to get you on. And I think people are going to take away some just absolute gold for what they can actually apply in their business today. So I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah, great. And I like how you added in, like, let's make more money because more money is better than less money. But that's not where we should stop. I think that's where we should start. And you're right. It is about how are you showing up in the world and are you living the life that you want to live so that when you are on your deathbed, you can look back and say, I gave it everything. I said everything I needed to say. I went for everything I wanted to go for. That to me is what it's really about. The money is nice. The money is a bonus, but let's look at how we can get the most out of every minute.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I just did a speech on Wednesday and I did the same thing. I got everybody in the room because I was talking about this real estate deal that I financed. That took the whole 30 minutes at the beginning. I said, we got to ground this in the humanities, right? Just kind of like a liberal arts education. You got to ground it in what this personal development, because I can give you all the tips and tactics. You're not going to do it. You're not going to succeed and you're not going to feel fulfilled unless we ground that. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today too, how you can really ground that.
Yeah.
Well, cool, David. I wanted to ask you, just for our listeners that might be unfamiliar with your background or your story, to kind of bring us back to where it kind of all started for you.
Well, I was born in a little country town in Australia, and I didn't know this until later on looking back, but my emotions shut down. I had a tragedy when I was 7 years old, and I saw my little sister killed in a traffic accident. And I didn't really think it was that big a deal. I had a little sister that morning, and then that afternoon I didn't. And we didn't know about therapy and what the impact could be on my parents and on me. But apparently what happened is as a trauma response, I shut down the feeling side and I got really good at the intellectual side. So I came top of my school. I became really good at mathematics. I got paid to go to university, very privileged existence. And then I got this amazing job on Park Avenue consulting to Sony Music and Ford and Exxon. And I figured I had it made at the age of 24, living on Park Avenue.
Tell me a little bit about when your sister passed. Like, I just had a woman on yesterday about the grieving process. And that's interesting that you moved into almost like this intellectual standpoint, that because you shut something down. And then it seems like that's really where a lot of things changed in your life, was you're using this intellectual side of the brain for a lot of things. When did the emotional side come back?
It started at about age 23 when I went to a psychiatrist to say, why do I keep breaking up with my first partner? So I fell in love with a woman and I broke up with her 8 times. And the 9th time I wanted to go back with her, I knew I couldn't because her family hated me by now and I'd done so much damage to her. And I said, what's going on? And he took a history from me and he said, well, I think you never grieved. You never learned how to grieve. And I think we call it a complicated grief reaction. And so he said, I think you are sensitive and that's why you're having trouble now. And I think I can help you. Oh my God, that was maybe the best day of my life, that I found that there was an answer to what I was going through. And then he helped me a lot. He helped me to learn how to cry. He taught me how to go back to my parents and open up the conversation with them about what they went through. I talked to my neighbors. It was a bit of a revelation. And then 3 years later, when I was in New York, someone recommended a personal growth program. And even though they all wore name tags and they smiled way too much, I thought, let me get in and get out and just see if there's anything in here for me. Well, they cracked my heart open. They cracked my cynicism. And I discovered that I knew nothing about emotional intimacy, vulnerability, leadership, transparency, authenticity, influence. And so I got very excited and I quit my job. And I've spent the last 20, 25 years of my life catching up with all of the things that I missed. So now I'm a pretty unusual coach. If people come to me, I say to them, look, and I only really work with business owners who are already successful, but I say, if all you want is more money, you should go to someone else because I can help you with the money, but that's just the beginning. I'm interested in how's your relationship with your kids? How's your self-expression? Where are your edges? What are you nervous about that'd be uncomfortable for you? And are you interested in what courage might do for your life? So I work with the entire person and I'm unwilling to do anything else.
So where do you start with a person when you're looking at working with them, right? So I think a lot of people, especially like young, ambitious men, for example, like most people I work with, they look at the age of 21 to 25, it's all about the money. Where do you start with someone like that, that's in that group? That's like, well, it doesn't need to be this way. How do we get in and break into their realm so I can speak their language?
I start with a very simple question, which is 12 months from now, what do you want? And a great question that just came to me, a way to ask it is, if you could wave a wand, 12 months from now, what would your life look like? And I like to see 3 concrete business goals. Money's usually one of them. So yeah, how much money do you want? Another question I usually ask is, in this goal setting question, is how much time off do you want? How many hours are you working a week right now? And how do you want it to look in 12 months? So this starts to get the brain churning and moving and creating. And then I want to see 3 personal goals. Do you want to be 50% closer with your partner? Do you want to be in a relationship? Do you want your kids to trust you 50% more than they do right now? Do you want to be a speaker? Do you want to swim with dolphins? I don't mind what your goals are. So we start this creative process. I've got one client, we've had 3 sessions now, and we're about to wrap up that side of it because we've been peeling the onion. And as she starts to learn more about what she wants, we can go a little deeper and little deeper. And then next will be the planning. All right, how are you going to do that? How are you going to create that? What is the strategy? So that's often where I start. After that, absolutely anything could happen because I never know what's going to come out of my mouth. It depends on who's in front of me and what comes up. I just did a coaching session with a guy. He spaced on that we were having a session, so he hadn't done his preparation. And what came out of it as we're talking was he doesn't feel in the driver's seat at work or at home, and him missing a coaching call is just an example. It was a symptom of that. So it brought out a beautiful conversation, and now he's got a couple of exercises he can do to practice to get more in the driver's seat in his own life. Because I said, if you're not showing up for your call with me, where else in your life are you not showing up? And he was like, wow, well, let's start with my marriage. Yeah. So it got deep really fast.
How do you get to that level of depth? Because sometimes people, like if you did the magic wand question, they might have some kind of bad goal, for example, right? Because I think that there are goals that can be bad, or that the timeline's not right, or that it's not rooted in a good place. It's kind of rooted from something different, something not from the heart. How do you get to a good goal setting kind of session with somebody?
Well, I'll make the point that I don't care so much what the goals are. I care about my client's relationship to the goals. How do they feel about it? And if the goals are hitting me as boring and dry, then I'll poke. And here's a question someone asked me last year in my men's group. He said, David, what would have you celebrate your ass off? And that stopped me in my tracks. And I took 2 weeks to sit with that question, because I could think of things I wanted. I want a home entertainment system, and I'd like a partnership, and there's different things I wanted. But what would have me do the happy dance and want to call all my friends? That was a confronting question. So that's one way I might take someone deeper if I'm not buying that they're enrolled in their own goals. Another question I've just started asking. So if someone listens to this interview and they decide they want to get on a call with me and see if we'd be a fit, there's some prep to do before we get on the call. And one of the questions I just added was, if you had 6 months to live, what would you spend that 6 months doing? That shows me a lot about their values and what they care about. And then if their goals don't match what I've read in that answer, I might poke a little bit more and say, well, you mentioned you want to spend more time with your kids. I don't see that on your goals list. You mentioned you would travel more, or you'd be volunteering or being of service or whatever. I don't see that here. And so I might get to do a bit more prodding.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. What would get you to really celebrate? As you were speaking, I was kind of thinking of what that is for me. And it is a great question. I think it wouldn't do it justice to sit with that any less than a couple of days, because I think that really puts you in a position. It shows your values too. So what I was immediately thinking was some type of like award or some kind of cool recognition. Well, it shows a lot about my personality too. Like, I want this kind of recognition at some level. Well, that tells me a lot about myself and a lot about other people. Somebody else might just be cool with some other kind of happy dance thing, right? So it's really interesting. It got me, as you were discussing that, I'm thinking that in my head, wow, this is teaching me not only what a good goal could be, but a lot about myself and what I value.
Exactly. And that's where I get excited. I want to know about the person. I want them to know themselves. You think we should know ourselves because we live with ourselves all the time, but it's a whole journey. So that question, what would have me celebrate my ass off, is a big one. And I want to double click on that other one. If you had 6 months to live, I've addressed this 3 times in my life. Once when I was 27, I said, what would I do if I had 6 months to live? If I had 6 months and could do anything I wanted. And when I was 27, the answer was, I'd like to be a professional entertainer at the ski fields. I'd like to play guitar and sing for pubs and parties, and put on a black afro wig and sing Blame It on the Boogie, and put on a blonde ABBA wig and sing SOS and entertain the crowd. So I did. I quit my consulting job, went back to Australia, and I spent 1.5 years as an entertainer. The second time was about 10 years ago, and the answer was, I'd go to Bali. I'd spend my time in Bali because it was my favorite place I ever visited. So instead of spending 6 months there, I just thought, I'll just go for a month or 2 and see how it feels. Well, it felt so good that I came back to the States, sold everything I had, and just moved with 2 suitcases to Bali and spent 2 or 3 years learning Balinese and playing ultimate frisbee and video games. And this is what I did with my life for 3 years out of that question. And then more recently, I've asked myself the same thing. And I think the answer is, I'd like to go and do a really deep, in-depth acting training in Los Angeles and live the life of an actor. I want to do that. So this is a great question, listeners. If I had 6 months to live, what would I do? Doesn't mean you have to go and do it right now, but it might tell you something about yourself. And it might be that you don't want to wait 2, 5, 10, 20 years to get around to it, because we never really know how long we have.
Yeah, it's almost like budgeting your bucket list, right? So you think of all the things you want to accomplish, but actually putting it into your operations plan, if you will. Once a year, I want to try one of these things or cross one of these things off, experiencing it now, or do it all at once. I mean, the acting class is a great example. Like, what if you wanted to make a movie? How do we do this? And figure it out and go do it. And I think that's what's cool too about what's different about you. And I think what's different about a lot of really successful people is they'll have that idea and then they'll just go do it. And they're going to figure out how to get it done. I think there's a lot of people out there that dream, but they don't put the action behind it. What's kind of your message to those people? Because it can be something that I think requires a lot of courage to be able to take action on something that might be different lifestyle or something like that. So tell me a little bit more about how we can work with those types.
Yeah, well, it takes guts to live your life. I heard that once from a shop attendant at a clothing optional hot springs in California. I had a girlfriend, and there was someone that I'd met who I really liked, and I was honoring my agreements, my boundaries. I just wanted to buy her a gift. And I said to the shop attendant, God, if I do this, my girlfriend's going to be pissed. And yet this is what feels true for me. I want to give this woman a gift, no strings attached. I'm not breaking any agreements. And she said, it takes guts to live your life. It hit me so hard. And so I bought the present, I gave the gift, and then I told my girlfriend, yeah, I bought someone something nice. And it wasn't that big a deal in the end, but it seems scary. So a lot of people come to me because they want to change their careers or they want to up level in some way, and they recognize that it is scary. One thing I do with them is, well, let's look at the upside, because sometimes we don't see all the upside. We just see the scary side of switching out from our job to our own business, or making a pivot, or moving countries, or getting married, or having a kid, or whatever. We see the scary side. So I'd say, let's generate the upside. What's really possible? And sometimes that's enough. Just as we talk about it, they get excited and start to see it. With this book that I'm writing, Name That Mouse, I had the idea recently, wait a minute, what if we did Name That Mouse for kids and got kids communicating and naming their emotions and their thoughts and feelings? And then as I was talking it out with a friend, I thought we could get a famous children's author to be part of the project. So we don't have to push uphill. That'll open doors. And I started getting more and more excited. Now it's not scary at all. The slightest bit scary to write this book and then to see if we can get a kid's book into the school curriculum. It's starting to map out. So sometimes that's enough. If it's not, the next thing is to write down what we truly are afraid of. How could it go wrong? And I do this a lot around tough conversations. Okay, you're nervous about having this conversation, firing your employee. What could go wrong? What are you really worried about? Well, I'm worried they'll cry. Okay, what else? They might get mad at me. Okay, what else? They might say bad things about me in the industry. Okay, got it. Are you willing to accept those consequences? If worst case, are you willing to accept the consequences? Yeah. Okay, great. Can you mitigate the consequences? Is there a way we can reduce the chance of this stuff happening? Yeah, I guess if I had some better language, or if I found a better way to approach it, or if I offered them a severance package and we start to mitigate it and get to the point where the upside is still really high and the downside really doesn't seem that big a deal anymore.
Yeah, I think that's really a great exercise to go through. My background was in systems engineering. So I did a lot with reliability engineering, with aerospace, defense, automotives. And it's funny because we actually have a chart for when failures on a machine can go wrong. You look at, okay, well, is this failure, can it be corrected? If it fails, can it be prevented? Or can it be driven till failure because the failure is not that significant? So the worst thing that could possibly happen is we need to be able to detect it and prevent it, right? The second would be, well, let's fail and we'll correct it. And the third is like, let's just let it fail. Let's just let it happen. And that was kind of the framework that we always went through. So we do this FAMICA. It was a failure modes, effects, and criticality analysis. we'd rank it by the occurrence and the severity. So the more severe the problem is and the more frequent it is, the bigger deal. We got to really figure out how we handle this one. But if it's not very severe and not very frequent, well, then this isn't a big problem at all. And I think you can apply the same thing to your life with these scary situations. If you want to try a new job or do something like that, it's like, well, what's the worst that could happen? Well, then I'll be unemployed for how long? Okay, 6 months. Okay, how severe is that to do you have an emergency fund? Is this all you've got? And you can start to ask these questions much like you're doing to figure out the severity and the criticality, to get your criticality, the severity and the occurrence.
I love how your mind works. I'm really appreciating you here. I think a couple of things that you brought up that I hadn't was the idea that, like how likely is it really? Maybe it could happen and we're all scared about it, but how likely? Not very. Like once I went and apologized to someone for something I did when I was a kid, I tracked them down. I could have been prosecuted and gone to jail. Now that scared me for years. And finally I said, well, I'm willing to accept the consequence. But had I asked myself, how likely is it? Okay, it's not very likely after all this time that the person would be so upset by me confessing that they'd want to prosecute, but it was still there, but not very likely. So that's a great question. And the other thing you brought up was, can it be corrected? So maybe I am worried that if I tell my boss something, I'm going to get fired. But that doesn't mean maybe I can still get my job back. Or maybe someone will get angry with me, but that doesn't mean that we can't repair that and handle that. Right. So I love that. Often my mind and most human minds don't go that far to go, what could happen? How likely is it? Is there a way I can minimize the damage? And then if it does happen, is there a way I could repair it? If it did happen, once we go through all of that, it can be so much more peaceful. It's like, now I'm not worried anymore. But we have to shine the light on all this stuff first, because otherwise the subconscious is going, no, too scary, not going to do it. Let's just stay safe.
Well, I think that's why a lot of really successful entrepreneurs or business leaders have had some kind of experience, whether it's really traumatic or rock bottom, because now they have nothing to lose. It's like, I've already been there. I know I can get out of this if I ever go back. I've figured it out once, I can do it again. So they have this almost like callus around them. They've been hardened by reality, and now they can face a lot more challenging things. And over time, it's just like a callus, I think. You just get stronger. You get more able to face these consequences because you're like, I've failed a bunch of times. I've tried this.
Which I think is a wonderful argument for practicing deliberate discomfort and taking risks. Because if you just stay in the comfort zone all the time, you get to learn that. And I think as a society, unfortunately, that's the direction we've gone in. I imagine that 200 years ago, people were more robust. You break a leg, you hurt yourself, whatever. Like you're just used to a lot more hardship. These days, we've got so much comfort that if our chair doesn't recline far enough while we're traveling through the sky, we're pissed, right? If my tea gets cold, I'm annoyed. So unfortunately, our comfort zone has shrunk. But the benefit of practicing deliberate discomfort, whether it be a cold shower or having that edgy conversation with an employee or sharing with your partner that you broke an agreement, whatever it is, whenever you face that edge, you build a bit of a callus. Like I've had so many tough conversations that some of my tough conversations now aren't tough anymore. I still have tough conversations because I go for higher and higher and harder things, but you expand your reach, you expand your horizons. And I think that alone is enough of a reason to practice courage and practice deliberate discomfort.
There was a mentor of mine a few years ago, and he was in the military, and his whole philosophy in life was that you want to occasionally put yourself in situations of a bunch of discomfort because it makes average things taste so much sweeter. So he would do things like going into the wild for weeks on end with very minimal things to survive. He would go to very intense military training schools like Ranger School or Special Forces, because what they would do is constantly deplete you of all these things we take for granted. And then when you get out, it would just feel euphoric to just be sitting in a couch. Like, for example, air conditioning is just wonderful when you've been in the field for 4 weeks, right? And it's like something you just completely take for granted, especially on a warm summer day like right now. But I remember he was very adamant about finding those types of experiences all the time to harden himself in a way. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. And you don't have to go that far. I just went to Mexico a couple of months ago and didn't have the best time. It was really hard for me. I got food poisoning. My dog was pretty stressed with the whole trip. There was a lot of stuff that just didn't go well. COVID was very intense there. And when I got back, I got to appreciate my home. That's one of the reasons we travel. We get to do that. But you don't have to go and do a Navy SEAL exercise or whatever. You could just try a cold shower for 10 seconds. Right. That's one thing that you can do. Here's a great exercise. I love this exercise. Write at the top of a piece of paper, write down, what would I do if I was fearless? I'm not saying you have to be fearless. We're just asking, what if I was fearless? What would I do? What would I say to people in my life? What would I ask for in my business? Which celebrity would I ask to endorse my product? Who would I ask to work with me? We're just playing right now. Write down, you might take 5 minutes or 1 minute or 20 minutes to really start to paint a picture. This could show you where your edges are. And then circle 2 or 3 things and go and have those conversations or do those things. I'm going to fly to visit a friend next week. Getting on a plane is pretty tough for my nervous system, being around a whole bunch of people, someone kicking the back of my chair. I get anxious. I'll be staying at different places. I don't know if it's going to be quiet. And then we're going to do a sweat lodge. And I've heard that they can be very intense, sitting in a tent doing a sweat lodge. So, hey, it's going to be some discomfort, hopefully a lot of joy. But even the stuff that feels crappy, hopefully it'll push back my boundaries so that everything else becomes easier.
Kind of on this topic too, with the idea of having courage, but maybe more in like a communication standpoint, being able to ask people for permission. I mean, how do you approach things like that? Like being able to close a sale, some people are afraid to ask for money. Some people are afraid to ask for a podcast interview like this, or there's something that almost the same process happens. How do you approach something like that?
One of my clients recently, so I have all my clients fill in a self-coaching form before we speak. And the reason is I don't want to replace what they can do on their own. No, coach yourself as if I didn't exist using this form. I'll read it and then we build on that. And one of the questions in the form is, if you were fearless, what's one thing you would do this week? Such a great question. And one of my clients wrote, I would approach so-and-so to promote my product, a friend of his. And I said, well, what's stopping you? So that's the first question. What are you afraid of? And this works for your example of asking for the sale, pitching yourself for a podcast interview, or asking someone to promote your product. What are you afraid of? Well, firstly, they might say no, and I might feel like that says something about me. Okay, great. What else? Well, they might feel like they're on the spot. And particularly if you've already asked twice and you didn't get a response, maybe they feel like you're nagging, right? So what we came up with was a way that he could ask that gave his friend a way out. I said, why don't you ask, what's your criteria for doing promotions? I want to see if what I've got would be a fit and if there's a way I could make this a win for you. That gives him a way out. He can say, well, this is my criteria. It's pretty strict and this doesn't really fit. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. And he was like, okay, that's great. And he went and did the pitch. I had another client who said, I'm a bit nervous because I've already asked for something a couple of times and I didn't get anything back from my boss. So should I just stop? Should I just give up here? And we got to really look at where in her life she stops too early and just gives up. And I said, what are you worried about? I'm worried that he's going to think I'm pushy and maybe he'll say no just because I'm being pushy. I said, well, if you don't ask, you've got to know to begin with, right? That's your default response. You've already got to know. So it doesn't sound like you're going to be any worse off by pushing. And I gave an example of, I'm a huge fan of Alan Alda from MASH. I love this man. I so respect his values and what he represents. And I would like to have him be on my podcast. And so I got far enough that I got to his producer and I'd sent 3 emails with no response. And this was after Alan himself had said, well, reach out to my producer and we'll see what we can do. So I'd gotten that far. And then 3 emails, no response. What do you do? And what I did that worked for me is I said, hey, I don't want to be annoying. So I'm hoping this isn't bugging you. And I'm hoping this will be charmingly persistent. versus annoying. I want to get this to the top of your inbox. Is there anything we can do? On the fourth email, I got a response saying, hey, I'm sorry that I've been slow responding. Send me a list of questions. So I'm feeling very happy that I didn't stop too early. And I think so often in life, we stop after one ask. Well, no, often we'll stop before the first ask. I won't ask Richard Branson to write the foreword to my book because he gets pitched all the time and he's probably going to say no to me.
Right.
I won't ask Jack Canfield. I won't ask Steve Wynn from the Wynn Hotels. I push myself to ask all three of those people to write the foreword to my book. And I got a yes from one very generous man. And I forgot the thread of where I was going. I hope that was relevant to what you asked.
Yeah, it's having the courage and communication, right? And I think that was actually,
Right. Many of us will stop before the first ask. And I want to encourage us all to at least ask. Ask your partner for what you want in the bedroom. Giving them the freedom to say no. Hey, would you be interested in this? I want to try this out. What would you like? Ask someone to work with you or to buy your product. They can say no. And the more we practice it, the more calluses we can build around it. So don't stop before the first ask. And too many of us will stop after one asking. And I think that's a shame. If you care about it, look, if you don't really care, that's fine. I put it out to the universe will decide. I respect that. But if it matters to you, you've got to keep going because most other people in the world will get stopped before the first ask or the second or the third. They're not going to be persistent. They're not going to ask 5 or 6 times. Keep on going until someone lets you know, hey, I'm a no to this. Okay. Even once you get a no, you might decide that charmingly and persistently, you might respectfully. If you're open to another, would you be, I want to pitch you one more time. I think I didn't get my best foot forward. May I send you one more 30-second pitch, right? You can ask.
Yeah.
We're not going to be assholes about it. We're not going to be annoying about it. We might even say, I realize I've asked you 3 times already and I don't want to be annoying, but also if this just got lost by the wayside, it'd be such a shame if we dropped it right here. Let's just be honest.
I want to dig in on this just one more second because this is good. And the language you're using too, you're announcing, I don't wish to be annoying. So you kind of realize with some level of EQ, this person's receiving, okay, he knows he could be coming across annoying. I'm trying to be charmingly persistent. And I think that is like such a great way to word it because you're not like, I'm just trying to be persistent here, and then someone would be, he's just being persistent. That's cool. It's so much different the way you worded that. Are there ways you can kind of like structure it? Because I know I get LinkedIn pitches all the time. I feel like that's all that they do on LinkedIn. It's just persistently pitch me and I just ignore all of them. But if I saw something like that, it's like, wow, this person recognized they could be coming across annoying. So I'm like, yeah, you are cool. And he's I see what you're doing. It's different.
Yes. Yeah. So I think you just, in a nutshell, encapsulated the power of the book that we're writing right now. So the book's called Name That Mouse. And the idea is that we all know about the elephant in the room. You see it, I see it, no one's saying anything. But many creatures in the room are much more subtle. They might be little mice that are scurrying around. So if I'm reaching out to you on LinkedIn and I want you to buy my product and I don't say anything, that's a mouse in the room. In fact, it's a little bit more like an elephant because we both know that I want you to buy my product. And if I don't say anything, I can come across as disingenuous. By naming the mouse, hey, I'm hoping you might eventually become a client. For now, this is my goal. This is my aim. I'd like to help you in some way so that you can see the value of what I have. That's an example. I just made this up off the top of my head because it's the truth and I'm naming my own mice. Now, when you hear that, you can relate to me like, oh, this guy's actually being honest with me. He wants me to buy from him at some point, but for now, he'd like to help me so that I can see the value of this and I might become a client, or maybe I'll refer someone to him. All right, show me what you got. So the principle is the truth. Alex Mondosian is a great marketer, and he taught me when I was just starting to speak on the stage and to sell something from the stage, he taught me about transparent selling. And this is another example of naming that mouse. when I get up on stage, if I've got an offer at the end, everybody knows that I want them to buy it. And so they call it a pitch fest, right? You get up there, I'm going to tell you stuff and I'm going to try and sell you something. If I don't name that, it's weird, it's awkward, it's icky, and the people in the audience are probably going to be folding their arms. So what I started doing with Alex's coaching is I'd tell the truth. I'd name my mice up front. Hey, I want to do everything in my power to motivate, influence, and inspire you to continue your training with me, because I'm going to give you some amazing information today, but information alone isn't going to cut it. And I figure the best way I could do that is to give you the best information I have, and then you can decide at the end if you'd like to continue working with me or not. Does that sound fair? And the audience, they'll go, yeah. Okay, great. Now they know what's coming. They know I'm going to pitch them. I've got their permission to do it. I'm going to give them value. And then at the end, I'll say, I said at the beginning that I wanted to motivate, influence, and inspire you to continue your training with me. Would you like to know where to go to get more help with this? And a bunch of people in the audience would be like, yeah, like it's up front, nothing hidden. And then I lay out what I've got. Here's the pitch. If you want it, go and grab it. And I tell you what, the first time I ever did this, I thought if I sold $10,000 worth of product, I could hold my head up high and say, well, we did all right. We sold $127,000 of product in 15 minutes. 15 minutes, one woman leapt onto the table. I've got a video of it. Leapt full length onto the table to try and I had these tokens where you could get 1,000 off. And there was a stampede to the back of the room. The second speech I did, this was my first big speech. The second one, we had less people in the audience. I refined a few things and we sold $333,000 of training in 15 minutes.
Wow.
And I say that was largely generated by the fact that I was naming my mice. I'd even be up on stage and I'd notice that I'd made a big mistake. Instead of glossing over it, I'd tell on myself. I'd say, oh my God, you notice how I keep turning around and looking at these big screens behind me so I see where I'm up to in the slides? After 40 minutes of talking to you, I've just noticed the monitors down in front of me. I could have been just glancing at the consummate professional that I am. I just laughed and laughed and laughed, and they laughed with me. Now I'm with them. I'm not trying to pretend to be something.
Yeah,
I tell you, AJ, naming your mice is the doorway to connection, confidence, and leadership.
I agree completely. And I think this is related, or is in fact along the principle or the psychological principle of priming, where a great book on this was not only your book, Name This Mice, but the author of the book Influence, Robert Cialdini, I believe it might be pronounced something different, wrote the book Influence, but then he did a sequel called Persuasion. And he talked about this idea of priming, which is a lot like naming your mice. He gives an example early on in the book where he was walking, they did a study with people trying to get surveys at a shopping mall. And they would stand there and they'd ask them, hey, can you fill out the survey? Most people, no. But when they would prime and ask, do you think you're a helpful person? They would say, well, yeah, I'm a helpful person. Well, would you mind filling out this survey? And then they got like a 90% retention rate because they had already primed their mind to think that. In a lot of ways, what you're talking about with naming your mice is kind of priming the audience too. You're already disclosing the awkward uncomfort that comes with you're listening to a motivational speaker. There's going to be a hard sell here, and then you're like, well, I'm going to sell some things today. And if we have a great discussion, and now you've taken the defense off them. I think it's a great sales tactic because you've removed this defensiveness. Now they're, oh, okay, he's cool. Like he's with us. It's really brilliant.
The temptation in life generally is to strategize and manipulate. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just that it isolates us. And people are smart enough to recognize a lot of manipulation. So if you kind of surprise them at the end with this sale opportunity, they might resent it. They might feel pressured. They might not have had time to think about it. I'd rather tell them up front, give them 60 minutes to think about whether or not they want to work with me. And then at the end, they're much closer to being ready. So this book is about unstrategizing. And here's one reason why. The brain doesn't have 1/billionth of the information it needs to make the right decision. We have very little information. We don't know the future. for example. So a simpler way to be is tell the truth and let the universe work out the rest.
Mm.
And I think this can work with sales, as we've demonstrated. If you just be straight, I would like you to buy from me. I'm dating right now because I'm single and I'm looking for a relationship. It can be fun to be upfront. I'd like to spend some time with you. Even there's one woman recently, I asked, she's single, and I said, are you looking for a relationship? What's going on? To disclose, I'm single and I'm looking, and you seem like a really high quality human, and I'm interested in spending more time with you and seeing if anything develops. Now all my cards are on the table.
Yeah.
Right?
There's no more
and if she says no to that, then that's what she should say. There should be a no. We shouldn't be hanging out with me pretending it's going to be something else where I'm always, definitely wanting it to be something else. That's the old strategy method. I say, let's put our cards on the table, let the universe work out what should happen.
I love it. I love that idea. One last question before we run up on time here. I think one problem that I see people like in this personal growth business, you're either in or you're not, right? Like some people are all in. Yeah, I need to work on myself. I see how this all translates into business. There's a lot of business people I also run into that just don't. There's like, I just do what I do. I don't think about it. There's no personal growth. Can you explain to me a little bit about how this transition happens, about how working on yourself converts into sales, about why, personal growth matters in real results?
Well, I don't know that I've ever been asked that question, and I'm sure I've never given this answer, but my story about this is that the growth work that I've done is having an impact on you right now. You, AJ, talking with me, the growth work that I've done is impacting your experience of me. If I hadn't done all that growth work, I'd be a different dude sitting in front of you. So presumably, and I'm making a big presumption now, if you enjoyed this experience with me, you might be thinking, boy, this guy seems real. That's my hope. This guy seems real. This guy seems honest. This seems like someone I would trust. This seems like someone I would recommend to other people to either work with him or be on a podcast or something like that. Now, if that's true, then there's a direct correlation between my personal growth work and my income, because the more podcasts I do, the more people hear my message and can work out if they want to be, if I'm the right coach for them, and they sign up as clients. So all of the people in my community, Jack Canfield, who wrote the foreword, my friend Guy Guri over here in Boulder, who I'm going to go and play ping pong with, all of these people are my friends because of all the work I've done. If I hadn't done this work, I believe I would have different friends who are operating at a lower frequency.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I'd still probably have a pretty good life doing that. But the more work I do, the more my vibration goes up and the more people want to be around that vibration. That's a great reason to go and do personal growth work. Know yourself better, share yourself better. Hey, this is a mouse. I just realized it's scurrying around in my head. I want to name it with you. And the more we do that, we upgrade our Rolodex. I got to hang out with John Gray from Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus as a peer. I get not just like watching him on stage. I got to ask Marianne Williamson, former presidential candidate, if she's single because of the work that I've done. If I didn't do the work, I wouldn't get to play in those arenas.
Yeah, 100%. Especially in a business where, like you're in, where really your mind and your knowledge is your product. The ability, your ideas that you can share and working with people is your product. So the more that can improve, the higher quality that product continues to be as well. So it's actually a very like black and white, like almost a very linear path too in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for my business where I'm coaching people, it's so obvious, the correlation. All the work I've done on myself, I think it makes me more trustworthy. And also I'm able to hold space for so far almost anything a human's going through. I had one client come to me to increase her revenue in her business, and then she was diagnosed with cancer. And one of my favorite sessions I've done this whole year was when I did a session with her and her partner about how they're framing this, how they're reacting to it, and what game they're going to play going forward. but I could hold that space for them because I've been through such dark places myself in my work. I've been through the dark night of the soul more often than I wish I had. But it means on the other side of all that scary, uncomfortable stuff that I've done, I've got a friend who's been suicidal for some time. I'm one of the few people she can actually be honest with about wanting to take her own life because I'm not going to freak out. I'll help her. I'll support her. I'll strategize with her if she wants, but I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to need supporting. All of her other friends and her family, they need support around the fact that she might not be here next week. I don't need that support. And so the investment in ourselves and in finding out who we actually are and what we're scared of and where our edges are, I can't say enough about. I think it pays off. That's my point. It pays off. I do believe it pays off monetarily. It's going to pay off in terms of your relationships and your friendship and the love in your life. And it's going to pay off in terms of how you feel about the world. And how do you put a price on that?
Wow. That's a great closer to end this, I think. And David, where can people find you, hear about your book and stay connected with you?
I just have to write down that time reference because I really liked that. I want to pull out that clip. So that was awesome about.
That was a heck of a close.
Yeah, about the payoff for personal growth. Where people can find out, I've created a gift basket of goodies for listeners. And there's a very easy to remember link that'll take you to a hidden page on my site where you can get this gift basket. One thing I have is a cheat sheet on how to get twice as much done in half the time. We didn't talk about that today, but a lot of people find that really valuable. If you want to be part of the Kickstarter campaign for Name That Mouse, this book, just donate a few dollars for it and we'll give you the trailer for the book and you can be part of this movement to have the world be more transparent. Because can you imagine what that's going to be like in 20 years if people start naming mice with each other, left, right, and center? And you can also get on a call with me if you want to find out if we'd be a fit as client and coach. There's a way to do that at this special link. And the link is myfocusgift.com. Also, we're just launching Extraordinary Focus, which is a new podcast. And you could listen to me as well as the amazing AJ Armstrong if you go to myfocusgift.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll have all those links in our show notes. Once again, you guys are listening to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews podcast featuring winners, people crushing it, wallets, money, finance, worldviews, some mind-blowing stuff like today. Thank you guys for listening. You can listen to this podcast at aaronjarmstrong.com/podcasts with an S. You can also go to anywhere you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, anywhere you guys get your podcast. Thank you again, David, for joining us. Go out there, be somebody.